Hi there, let's crochet Ted or Charlie. First, remove the lid. I'll actually use it to store the items I won't need. Here you've got the care instructions along with the yarn. Set aside the smaller yarn skeins for the moment. You'll need the gray yarn and the hook. In this little bag, you'll also find the stitch markers. You'll need those too. Set the stuffing aside. Now take the yarn, remove the label, and locate the yarn tail. Place the yarn ball inside the tin. This way the yarn will stay clean and unravel smoothly. It will also help you control the tension in the yarn. Okay, let's begin with the magic ring. I'll demonstrate a hands-only method, although there are plenty methods using a hook. To start off, take the yarn holding the yarn tail with your non-dominant hand and the working yarn with your dominant hand. Place the working yarn over the tail and pinch where they intersect. Now pull the working yarn out of the loop that you've just created and give this new loop a twist to form a cross at the base. Then pull the working yarn through this loop, tightening it until the knot is snug but not too tight. To test the magic ring, pull on the yarn tail, and if your ring tightens up, you've got it right. Ensure that the ring is not too big. This will make it easier to crochet into it. Now grab your hook and insert it into this large loop. To adjust the loop to the size of the hook, pull on the working yarn. The loop should be just the size of the tip of the hook so that it is easy to slide the hook through. To hold your yarn, turn your palm face up and position the yarn on your pinky and ring fingers. Fold the fingers, passing the yarn behind and over the middle finger and the pointer. Keep the magic ring on the middle finger and secure the ring with your thumb, leaving space for the hook. Maintain tension in both the working yarn and the ring. In row 1, let's make 6 single stitches. Insert your hook into the ring under both of these strands and grab the working yarn from underneath. Pull the hook out of the ring, forming another loop on the hook that's about the same size as the previous one. Yarn over again, and this time twist the tip of the hook downwards and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Now you've made your first single stitch. We got 5 more to do. Check the size of the loop on the hook and continue adding the stitches. Put your hook through the ring and grab the working yarn from underneath. Pull the hook out and yarn over again. Twist the tip of the hook and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Repeat these steps to create 4 more single stitches. Maintain tension in both the working yarn and the ring in order to make it easier to crochet. Keep an eye on the size of the loop on the hook and the loops you're picking up. This way your stitches will be even in size. Once you're done with all 6 stitches, pull on the hook to make a larger loop. This will save our last stitch from falling apart. Here you can see we've got our 6 stitches all lined up. Each stitch has the shape of a V. The largest loop you pulled out with the hook is not considered a stitch. Now let's tighten the magic ring. Get the yarn tail out and pinch the last stitch in the ring. Pull on the yarn tail so that the ring tightens, but not all the way. You can count the stitches by the V's. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now find the second and the third stitch again and place a stitch marker into each one of those. Simply slide the stitch marker under both bars of the V and ensure you're not using the very first V at all. This is going to help you identify the stitches to put your hook through in round 2. Here is our row 1 with 6 single stitches. In round 2, we are going to have to make 6 increases. An increase is typically 2 single stitches made in the same stitch of the previous round. Increases are used to shape our project, and in our case, we need to start widening our circle to shape the head. Let's take a closer look at the formulas in crochet. SC means single crochet stitch. In row 1, you make 6 single stitches. In row 2, INC means increase. You make 6 increases, and each increase is 2 stitches. So 6 times 2 equals 12 stitches for row 2. The number in the brackets tells you how many stitches you'll have by the end of the row. The formulas in row 1 and row 2 are relatively simple. However, more complex formulas exist. For example, let's look at row 3. The formula for row 3 reveals numbers within square brackets multiplied by another number, and the final number in the brackets indicates the stitches you should have at the end of the row. What's inside the brackets represents a sequence, which in this case is a single stitch followed by an increase. The sequence is then multiplied by 6, meaning you repeat this sequence 6 times to complete the row. As a result, you will get 18 stitches in that row. Get your yarn in working position, and in row 2 we need to make 6 increases. Put your hook under the first stitch, the one that's not marked. This can be tricky at times because this first stitch gets overly tight. Make sure you have 3 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pick up a loop. Yarn over again and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. This completes the first stitch of the second round. Mark the stitch with a stitch marker to indicate the starting point. Now let's proceed with the increase. Reinsert the hook into the same stitch where the first single crochet was made. Then create another single crochet in that same stitch. Always ensure that the loop you're picking up is of the same size as the loop on the hook. That completes our first increase. Now let's move on to the second stitch and work our second increase. Remove the stitch marker and put your hook under the V of the second stitch. Make a single crochet stitch. Remember to twist the tip of the hook to secure the yarn. Reinsert the hook into the same stitch and work another single stitch. Now that the second increase is complete, let's create the third one into the third stitch. Remove the stitch marker and insert your hook under the V of the third stitch. Work 2 single stitches into this stitch. Now we have completed 3 increases and have 3 more to do. Once you're done with row 2, pull out the hook and tighten up the ring. Turn your work around and find the yarn tail. Then pinch your project and pull on the yarn tail to ensure that the ring center is nice and tight. Once that's done, count the stitches starting with the marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Reinsert the hook into the loop, adjusting the loop to fit snugly around the hook. In row 3, follow a simple pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase. Remove the stitch marker and make your first single crochet into the first stitch of the previous row. Once you're done with the first stitch, mark it with a stitch marker and move on to making an increase. Locate the next stitch and put your hook through it. Create a single crochet, then reinsert the hook back into the stitch and create another single crochet. This completes our increase. Repeat this sequence 5 more times. By the end of the row, you should have 18 stitches. Once you're done, pull out the hook and count the stitches starting with the stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Make sure to always count the stitches after completing the round, especially if it involves increases. Identify the right side of your crochet project by the presence of only vertical bars. The wrong side will feature both vertical and horizontal bars, forming a distinct texture. You always want to hold your project with the right side facing you. When counting the stitches on the right side of your project, begin by locating the magic ring and the 6 single stitches in row 1. Next, you'll notice that the second row starts with a bump. Directly under this bump is the first stitch of the second round. The stitch corresponds to the hole under the V, similar to the hole under this V, but is the first stitch of the second round. We made an increase in this stitch, so you'll find that 2 posts trace back into this hole. And as you follow along the round, you'll encounter 5 more instances where 2 posts trace back into the same hole, indicating the 6 increases. The first stitch of the third round is a single stitch, so there's just 1 post tracing back into that hole. In the second stitch, you'll find that 2 posts are tracing back into that hole. This is the increase that we've made. Then again, a single stitch and an increase. A single stitch and an increase. By examining the right side of your project, you can accurately count the stitches. This method is essential for identifying any errors. If you discover that you have too few or too many stitches in a row, first identify the mistake by counting the posts. Then pinch the last correct stitch to keep it secure and carefully unravel all the stitches beyond it. Next, reinsert the hook into the small loop just above the stitch you've saved and proceed to complete the round correctly. In row 4, follow a pattern of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this pattern 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. Start by making the first single stitch and mark it with a stitch marker. Then follow along, creating another single stitch, and in the next stitch, crochet an increase. Repeat this sequence 5 more times. And once you're done, count the stitches to ensure you have 24. In round 5, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 30 stitches. At this point, your piece may begin to curve inward. Simply adjust it by turning it outwards to ensure that the right side is facing you and the wrong side stays hidden inside the piece. In round 6, follow a sequence of 4 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 36 stitches. Remember to keep marking off the first stitch of every round. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have 36. To count the rows, start by locating the magic ring with the 6 single stitches. The bump indicates the starting point of the second round. The second round ends once it reaches the bump. The stitch above the bump is the first stitch of the third round. When crocheting in continuous rounds, the last stitch of the round will appear to be 1 row higher than the first stitch of the same round. The first stitches are aligned one on top of the other, creating a clear line between the first and last stitch of each round. On one side of the bump you'll find the beginning of the round, and on the other side you'll find the end of the round. So this is the first round, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Counting the rows on either side will give you the same number of rounds. In rounds 7 through 10, create 36 single stitches for each round. In row 11, the pattern to follow involves 4 single stitches and a decrease. A decrease is essentially the reverse of an increase, where 2 stitches are combined into one. This effectively reduces the total number of the stitches in the row. Start by making the first single crochet stitch into the first stitch of the previous round, and of course, mark it off as the beginning of the round. Make 3 more single stitches. Each stitch has a back loop and a front loop. You want to insert your hook only under the front loop. Now find the next full stitch and insert your hook under the front loop of that stitch. You will find both back loops inside the piece you're working on. Then yarn over and bring the hook together with the yarn through both of those front loops. You now should have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over again and complete the stitch by pulling the hook with the yarn through both loops on the hook. Find the next full stitch and insert your hook under the whole stitch. Now go ahead and create 4 more single stitches. After that, create a decrease. Repeat this pattern until the end of the round. By the end of the round, you should have 30 stitches. Once you're done with the decrease, count the number of stitches. You should have exactly 30. In row 12, follow a pattern of 3 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this pattern 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. Before we move on to row 13, we need to put in the eyes. The eyes come with a pad that makes them shine, as well as the backing that you use to lock the eye in place. Before we start putting the eyes in, let's figure out where to put them. Make sure that the bump of the second row is turned to the side. Begin by counting the rows. Identify the 7th and the 8th rows. The eyes will be placed between them. Select a hole in this area and insert your hook to loosen it. Then grab a stitch marker and put it as a placeholder for the first eye. Double check to make sure that you've got the stitch marker exactly between rows 7 and 8. To position the second eye, count 5 holes from the first eye to the right. Insert your hook into the 5th hole and widen it. Then grab another stitch marker and place it in this hole. Once you're done, you should have 5 posts between the stitch markers. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now replace the stitch markers with the eyes. Use the stitch markers to widen the hole a little bit so the eyes go in easily. Now turn your piece inside out just with the post showing from the inside and grab the backings. Put the backings on the post of the eyes and make sure that they click right in because otherwise they'll simply fall off when you continue stuffing the toy. To triple check that the eyes are fitted correctly, check how many stitches there are between the eyes. There should be only 2 stitches visible. All the rest of the stitches are hidden under the eyes. Now let's start stuffing the head. Grab some stuffing and spread it gently with your fingers so that there are no lumps. Insert the yarn tail inside the head and start putting the stuffing in. You only need to half fill the head to avoid the stuffing getting in the way during the next rounds of crocheting. Gradually, we will add more stuffing as we go. Make sure to put the stuffing in neatly so none of it is sticking out. In round 13, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this pattern 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. Use your middle finger to separate the fabric from the stuffing. This way, your hook will not be catching onto the stuffing. Once you've completed the round, count the stitches to ensure you have exactly 18. In round 14, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat the sequence 6 times, and by the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. Count the stitches, you should have 12. Now is the perfect time to completely stuff the head. Add the stuffing gradually to ensure that the head is still squishy and not too hard, but at the same time it's nice and round. Now squish the head and check if it's still too soft. You can add a little more stuffing to it. Just be careful not to overfill. In round 15, the sequence to follow is a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat the sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. In round 16, crochet a total of 18 single stitches. In round 17, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. Count the stitches to ensure you have exactly 24. In round 18, crochet exactly 24 single stitches. In round 19, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 30 stitches. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have 30. In round 20, crochet 30 single stitches. In round 21, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. In round 22, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. In round 23, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat the sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. You are very close to completing the body, so now it's time to fully stuff it, as the next round will close it off. Add the stuffing in small pieces and distribute it evenly. In round 24, crochet 6 decreases. You should have only 6 stitches left by the end of this round. Once you're done and you've got 6 stitches in the row, cut off the working yarn, leaving a yarn tail for sewing. The yarn tail should be around 6 inches long. Pull the yarn tail all the way through the last stitch and remove the stitch marker. Now let's fasten off the body. To do that, grab the tapestry needle and thread it with the yarn. Start by inserting the needle into the stitch where the stitch marker was. Guide the needle from the inside to the outside. Ensure that you're only catching the front bar of the stitch. Then pass the needle through every stitch in the same manner. After threading through all of the stitches, pull the yarn tail to tighten the center. Next, insert the needle into the stitch right beneath the yarn tail and bring it out of the opposite side of the body. To hide the yarn tail, insert the needle into a stitch either directly above or below where it came out of. Avoid the creation of horizontal bars on the toy's body. Be careful not to pull the yarn tail too tight, as this can create dents. If a dent does form, gently slide the needle under the affected stitch and nudge it upward to restore its normal shape. Leave the yarn tail as it is for now. Begin crocheting the arm with a magic ring. Ensure that your magic ring is not too big and create 6 single stitches for round 1. Count the number of stitches, and if you've got 6, tighten the magic ring and move along with row 2. In round 2, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat the sequence 3 times. By the end of the round, you should have 9 stitches. Count the stitches to ensure you have 9. In rounds 3 and 4, crochet 9 single stitches each. At this point, make sure to tighten the magic ring so there is no visible hole in the center. In round 5, crochet a sequence of a single stitch followed by a decrease and repeat the sequence 3 times. By the end of the round, you should have 6 stitches. In rounds 6 and 7, crochet 6 single stitches each. Pinch the edges of the arm together to align 2 pairs of stitches. Insert your hook through the first pair of stitches, yarn over, and make a single crochet stitch. Repeat this for the second pair of stitches. After crocheting both sides together, cut the yarn leaving an 8-inch tail for sewing. Pull the yarn tail completely through the last stitch. Follow the same steps to make the second arm. Start making the leg by creating the magic ring. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the ring. In round 2, crochet 6 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. In rounds 3 and 4, crochet 12 single stitches each. At this point, tighten the magic ring. In round 5, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 4 times. By the end of the round, you should have 8 stitches. At this point, add a little bit of stuffing to the leg. In round 6, crochet 8 single stitches. To fasten off the leg, pinch both sides together to align 3 pairs of stitches. Insert the hook through the first pair of stitches, yarn over, and create a single stitch. Repeat the same with the other 2 pairs of stitches. After crocheting both sides together, cut an 8-inch yarn tail and pull the yarn tail through the last stitch completely. Repeat these steps to crochet the other leg. To crochet the ear, start with a magic ring. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the magic ring. Once you're done with the 6 stitches, tighten the magic ring and move forward to row 2. Before starting round 2, make a single chain stitch. To do that, simply yarn over and pull the working yarn through the loop on the hook. This is called a chain stitch. Now turn your work around and begin crocheting round 2. In round 2, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 3 times. By the end of the round, you should have 9 stitches. Before starting round 3, create another chain stitch and turn your work. In round 3, crochet 9 single stitches. To fasten off the ear, make another chain stitch, cut the working yarn leaving an 8-inch yarn tail, and pull this yarn tail all the way through the last stitch. There isn't really a wrong or right side, just ensure that both ears are turned out in the same way. Repeat these steps to crochet the other ear. To crochet the tail, start with a magic ring. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the ring. In round 2, crochet 6 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. In round 3, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 4 times. By the end of the round, you should have 8 stitches. Cut the yarn, leaving an 8-inch yarn tail. Pull this yarn tail all the way through the last stitch. To complete the tail, make an invisible fasten off. To do that, grab the tapestry needle and thread it with a yarn tail. Now skip the next stitch and insert your needle through the following one. Next, insert the needle back into the last stitch made before cutting the yarn. Slide it between the two bars of that stitch. Guide the needle out on the wrong side of the piece. This technique mimics a stitch, so this fasten off method is called invisible. Begin crocheting the muzzle with a magic ring. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the magic ring. In round 2, follow a sequence of an increase followed by 2 single stitches. Repeat this sequence 2 times. By the end of the round, you should have 8 stitches. In round 3, crochet a sequence of 2 increases followed by 2 single stitches. Repeat this sequence 2 times. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. Perform an invisible fasten off. Insert your needle under the stitch after the next one, and then guide it through the top bars of the last stitch you crocheted. Insert the needle under the horizontal bar of the last stitch you crocheted for additional security. This way we created a fake stitch that mimics any other stitch in the round, making the fasten off truly invisible. Now let's add the nose to the muzzle. Find the bump of the second row and insert your needle into the hole immediately before the first stitch of the second row, from front to back. Leave a small yarn tail in the front. Guide the needle from back to front through an adjacent stitch in the third row that is slightly to the side. Now lay a vertical stitch by guiding the needle back through the same hole close to the bump. Lay another vertical stitch using the same holes as the first one. After that, guide the needle out through an adjacent stitch in the third round, that's closer to the other side. Then guide it back through the same hole between rounds 1 and 2, closer to the bump. Lay 2 vertical stitches through these holes. Guide the needle out through any of the 2 stitches in the third round and lay a horizontal stitch over both stitches to hide the white spots between the vertical stitches at the top. Now thread the needle with the other yarn tail and insert the needle through the very center of the magic ring to complete the nose. Fit the muzzle onto the plush and check to ensure that you like how it turned out. Once you're happy with how it looks, tie the yarn tails together twice. Then cut off the excess yarn. Now let's sew the arms to the body. Prepare the needle in advance by threading it with the yarn tail of one of the arms. Place the arm against the body between rounds 14 and 17. And once you're happy with the position of the arm, insert the needle through the stitch on the body that is directly beneath the yarn tail. Guide it out of the stitch on the body that aligns with the last stitch of the arm's seam. Pass the needle through the last stitch of the arm seam from back to front. Turn the plush to face you and check the position of the arm. If you're happy with its position, insert the needle through the middle stitch of the arm seam and out to the back of the body. Leave the yarn tail at the back for the moment. Repeat this process for the second arm. Thread the yarn tail of the second arm through the needle and position the second arm onto the body. Ensure both arms are fitted symmetrically and proceed to sew the arm. Insert the needle through the stitch on the body that is directly beneath the yarn tail. Guide it out of the stitch that aligns with the last stitch on the arm seam. Guide the needle through the last stitch on the arm seam from bottom to top. Then guide the needle through the middle stitch of the arm seam and out at the back. Leave the yarn tails at the back for now. Now let's sew the legs to the body. The curved slope should fit against the body of the plush for a natural fit, and the straighter slope should face downwards to help the plush sit steadily. Position the first leg between rounds 20 and 21. Once you're happy with the position, grab a stitch marker and pin the leg to the body. Turn your project to face you and double check the position of the leg. Then grab the second leg and position it symmetrically to the first one. Make any necessary adjustments and pin the second leg to the body. Turn your project to face you to double check and confirm the position. Grab the tapestry needle and thread it with the yarn tail of the first leg. Now put your needle into the stitch of the body that is directly under the yarn tail. Bring the needle out on the other side of the leg, matching it up with the last stitch of the leg's seam. At this point, you can remove the stitch marker. Insert the needle through the leg from bottom to top. Proceed with the same steps on the other leg. Thread the other yarn tail through the needle. Turn the plush towards you to check the position of the leg. Make any necessary adjustments, and once you're happy, proceed to sew the leg onto the body. Now insert the needle into the stitch on the body that's directly beneath the yarn tail. Guide the needle through the body, exiting through the stitch that's directly beneath the last stitch on the leg's seam. At this point, you can remove the stitch marker. Now guide the needle through the last stitch on the leg's seam from bottom to top. Keep checking how the legs fit during the process of sewing. To further secure the legs and maintain them in a sitting position, guide the needle into the stitch on the body that's directly beneath the yarn tail and bring it out on the front of the body. Then put the needle through the leg itself and pull on the yarn to fit the leg closer to the body. Now insert the needle into a stitch on the body that is close to the one the needle exited from and guide the needle all the way through the body. This way the leg is going to be secured in a seated position. Repeat these steps for the second leg. Pull the yarn to tighten the stitches and insert the needle through the stitch directly beneath the yarn tail. Guide the needle out on the front of the body similarly to the other leg. And stitch through the leg. Gently pull the yarn to tighten the stitch. Then insert the needle into a stitch on the body close to the one the needle exited from, and guide the needle all the way through the body. Leave the yarn tails at the back for now. To sew the muzzle in place, first use the smaller yarn tail from the magic ring and thread it through the needle. We will use this yarn tail to secure the muzzle in place before sewing it on. Grab the plush and find the middle stitch 2 rows lower than the eyes. Guide the needle through this stitch and out the back of the head. Position the muzzle and pull tight on the yarn tail. Next, grab the longer yarn tail from the invisible Fasten Off and thread it through the needle. Insert the needle into the stitch on the face that is directly below the stitch on the muzzle where the yarn tail is coming out. Then guide the needle out from the stitch on the face that is directly below the next stitch along the muzzle's rim. Now insert the needle back through the muzzle from bottom to top. Guide the needle through the next stitch on the muzzle's rim from top to bottom and into the stitch of the face directly below the stitch that the needle comes out of. Continue sewing in the same manner, going from top to bottom when sewing through the muzzle into the face, and from bottom to top when sewing through the face into the muzzle. Follow along the round until the muzzle is completely sewn on. Guide the needle out at the back of the head through the same stitch where the other yarn tail is. Now check that the muzzle fits correctly. Now let's sew on the ears. Each ear has two yarn tails, one from the magic ring and one from the last stitch. Thread the yarn tail from the magic ring first and let's position the first ear. To find the spot for the ear, look for the second round and the sixth round. The ears should be positioned right between the second and sixth rounds. Once you find the perfect spot for the ear, lay the ear flat on the head. Guide the needle with the yarn tail from the magic ring through the stitch directly below where the yarn tail is. Then guide the needle out at the back of the head and create a fixing stitch, guiding the needle into the stitch one row lower to ensure that the ear stays in place. Then grab the other yarn tail and start sewing on the ear. Find the sixth row and guide the needle through a stitch that is directly beneath the first stitch of the ear's rim. Then guide the needle through the ear from back to front and into the head directly below the ear's rim. Guide the needle out through the next stitch behind the ear. Once again, guide the needle through the next stitch on the ear and into the head. Continue sewing in the exactly same manner until you reach the final stitch on the ear's rim. After you've completed the final stitch along the ear's rim, guide the needle out at the back of the head. Now position the second ear symmetrically to the first one and proceed with the same steps to sew it on. Before sewing on the tail, let's hide the yarn tails. To do that, you will need to reposition the yarn tails so that they form pairs, with each pair coming out from the same stitch like so. Then tie the yarn tails together twice. Once that is done, cut off the excess yarn and use the tapestry needle to push the knot inside the head or body. Now to reposition a yarn tail from one stitch to another, insert the needle into a stitch directly above or below the stitch that the yarn tail is currently coming out of, and guide it out of the same stitch where another yarn tail is. As you can see, I'm threading the needle after I put the needle through the stitches that I've selected. This actually helps me to save some time without putting the plushie down. Now tie the ends together twice. And cut off the excess yarn. Then push the knot inside using a tapestry needle. Hide all of the yarn tails except for the one that doesn't have a pair. Now let's start sewing the tail. Position the tail low enough to ensure the toy can sit properly. Once you have found the perfect position for the tail, insert the needle through the next stitch of the tail's rim. And after that, insert the needle through a stitch on the body that is directly beneath the yarn tail. Guide the needle out of the next stitch along the tail's rim. Then insert the needle through the next stitch on the tail's rim from bottom to top. This way your stitches will be hidden and the seam will stay invisible. Continue sewing along the rim of the tail in the same manner. When going from the tail into the body, always go through the rim of the tail first and then into the body. Then exit from the body and insert the needle through the tail's rim from bottom to top. Once you're done sewing on the tail, guide the needle all the way through the body to match this yarn tail up with the yarn tail that was left. Then tie those yarn tails together twice. Cut off the excess yarn and hide the knot. Congratulations, your Tether Charlie is complete, but we still need to make the heart. Start making the first heart lobe with a magic ring. In round 1, make 6 single stitches into the magic ring. In round 2, crochet 6 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. Count the stitches and tighten the magic ring before moving forward. In round 3, crochet 12 single stitches. At this point, you have completed the first lobe. We will need to fasten off the first lobe before moving forward to the second one. Cut the yarn tail, leaving a 3 to 5 inch yarn tail, just enough to complete the invisible fasten off. Please note, you only need to fasten off the first lobe. When you make the second lobe, do not cut the working yarn after round 3. Now let's make the invisible fasten off. Skip the next stitch in the round and insert your needle under the V of the following stitch. Then guide the needle through the top bars of the last stitch you crocheted. Insert the needle under the horizontal bar on the wrong side adjacent to this stitch for additional security. Check that the fake stitch blends in. Tie off the yarn tails and cut the excess yarn. Start making the second heart lobe with a magic ring. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the ring. In round 2, crochet 6 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. In round 3, crochet 12 single stitches. Once you have completed the second lobe, remove the hook and do not cut the working yarn. We will use this yarn to crochet both lobes together. Now let's crochet both heart lobes together. To do that, in round 4, we will crochet all along the rims of both lobes in a continuous round. Remove the stitch marker and position the lobes together. Then use the stitch marker to attach them temporarily so it's easier to crochet. Now grab the hook and insert it into the loop. Tighten the loop on the hook and let's make the first stitch of the 4th round. The first stitch of the 4th round will go into the lobe that we are attaching. Insert your hook under any stitch that feels comfortable on the rim of the lobe that is being attached and complete a single stitch. This is the first stitch of round 4. Mark it with a stitch marker. Now remove the stitch marker that was holding both lobes together. Then continue crocheting around the rim of the lobe that is being attached, making a total of 12 single stitches. Only after that is complete, continue crocheting along the rim of the second hard lobe, making another 12 single stitches. By the end of the round, you should have a total of 24 single stitches. Once you have completed the first 12 stitches along the rim of the first lobe, count the stitches to ensure you have exactly 12 and continue crocheting along the rim of the second lobe, making another 12 stitches. Identify the stitch on the other lobe that hasn't been used yet. For example, here we can see a post coming out of this stitch and the next stitch is empty. Start crocheting 12 single stitches along the rim of this lobe until you reach the stitch marker. By the end of the round, you should have a total of 24 single stitches along the rims of both lobes. Once you're done, count the stitches to ensure you have exactly 24 and move on to round 5. In round 5, make 2 single crochets followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have exactly 18. In round 6, crochet 18 single stitches. Now is the perfect time to stuff the heart. In round 7, crochet a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. In round 8, crochet 6 decreases. By the end of the round, you should have only 6 stitches left. To fasten off the heart, use the tapestry needle and thread it with the yarn tail. Insert the needle under the top bar of the next stitch from inside to outside, guiding it through. Repeat this for every following stitch in the round. Once done, pull on the yarn tail to tighten the round. Then insert the needle through the stitch directly beneath the yarn tail and guide it out between the two heart lobes. You will see a hole that you need to cover. Lay a stitch over that hole and create a few fixing stitches to secure the yarn tail. Finally, cut off the yarn tail and hide the excess yarn inside the heart. Now that the heart is ready, your Ted or Charlie is all set.